I wore the sweater for a reason.
Yeah,
It's not Christmas in the studio. It's I wore this because Gremlins came out, and weirdly, came out on the very same day as Ghostbusters, which would never happen now.
how insane is that? So we gave
That would be pushed
Ghostbusters.
back to 1987.
Yeah,
We gave
exactly.
Ghostbusters a huge amount of credit for kicking off the horror comedy thing, but Gremlins as well, right?
Right there with it.
On the same day. It's insane. And if you, again, I feel like people conflate Gremlins 2 with Gremlins, and if you
No.
watch that original, it is a black comedy. Like,
Oh,
it
yeah.
is-
A lot of
it's-
people get killed in that, and a lot of furry little animals meet
Yeah.
their horrific ends.
The sequel has some of that too, but it's very
It doesn't have one
different.
getting microwaved until it
Right.
explodes or thrown in a blender.
Yeah.
They wanted it. Well, Joe Dante wanted it to go even more hardcore. They wanted to
I
have
would love to see that movie.
Gremlins go into the McDonald's and eat the people rather than the food. He wanted the dog to get its fur pulled off of it.
I don't want to see that, but I want to see that first thing.
The other thing is like he and Spielberg totally conflicted about that weird Santa Claus story where they were telling the Santa Claus story. Like nobody wanted that. The studio didn't want that. Spielberg didn't want it. Joe Dante stuck to his guns.
Like,
and
no,
they
we're
were
putting it in there.
We're putting it in there. And Spielberg eventually relented. He's like, "Yep, it's your movie. It's your vision."
Cool.
They let it be in there. But I have memories of Gremlins just being kind of horrifying when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You see this cute Mogwai and you're like, oh, and then you see the movie and you're like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, the transformation scene, the first time I saw it, it was just like, oh, wait, no. Everything just got so much worse. Like it's like the portal into the other side opened, and I just saw all that was wrong with the world.
My mom and dad wouldn't let me go see it, and so I had friends at school that went, and they were telling me how awesome it was, and they had Gremlins lunchboxes and Gremlins toys, and I was like, I want to experience this amazing thing. And unfortunately, in a pre-VHS universe, there wasn't a lot I could. I mean, it existed in the world, but not for me, and didn't get to see it for a long time.
My parents did things where they would like wait, and I feel like their waiting was like waiting until I got older. Like they'd be like, "You're gonna wait almost a year, but it'll still be in theaters, and then you can watch it." And it's like, well, I guess I'm kind of older.
You're 6 months older than you were, and now none of my friends want to talk about it
You
anymore.
understand so much more about the world. Now, this movie came out in the summer. It came out June 8th.
Which is super weird, because
it's a
you would
Christmas
think it's a
movie.
Christmas movie, but I forget who the producer was. But they were like, no, we should release it at Christmas time. So and he's like, no. It's an action movie. It's
It
not a
would
Christmas
be
movie.
one of the big Christmas movies, I think, if it had been released in that frame. I think people would actually tie it to Christmas more. Sometimes I think people forget that it's even a Christmas movie. It's set in Christmas.
I think it's really hard to. I mean,
hard
they
to
made
forget.
a sweater out of it.
They made a sweater. I mean,
pretty great
what
sweater.
more can you say? So the budget was $11 million. It grossed $153 million.
Whoa.
I mean, there
That is
wasn't
twice as much as Terminator, by the way.
Yeah. And there wasn't much. I mean, outside of practical effects, there wasn't much on screen there.
But let's talk about those practical effects. I mean, that was some pretty spectacular puppetry with the Gremlins. They have a lot of personality. They really do.
Yeah.
You don't have as many of the individualized Gremlins in this one like you do in the sequel. But you do. You can clearly see both the glee and the wickedness conveyed in the eyes of those little puppets, and that's very well
That's
done.
Stan Winston again, right?
Yeah, and you
Such
know,
good work. God.
it was
He
supposed
was
to.
the 80s. in
I
a
know
lot of
he
ways.
was the age, but I'm just saying, like, you look at his body of work and like see he can go from the Terminator to Gremlins.
Yeah.
And like, God, the world is a sorely less bright place for having lost him. Like, I'm serious.
Eloquently
Absolutely.
put.
His work is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
You know, Gizmo was originally going to be one aspect of Stripe. That's another way that the movie was going to be darker. So Gizmo is actually going to turn into Stripe. So the protagonist creature was going to be the ultimate antagonist, and Spielberg was the one who said, "Yeah, we're not going that way."
Because they had to kill Gizmo in the end.
Yeah, that would be like the horrible. Like you're not going to sell a toy after that.
No.
There's
Sociopaths
also
would buy it.
there's also this like weird undercurrent in the movie of like the designer pets, which didn't even really exist at the time, but it was like, you guys, you shouldn't be you're not responsible enough to own this thing.
Yeah, there are weird sort of messages in this movie that you probably don't pick up on when you're a kid, like over-reliance on technology and designer pets. There is some weird stuff like that in Gremlins.
I was horrified to go to science class because of the whole thing that happens in the high school and the science lab. I was like, I don't want to go to high school now.
Anytime I saw an old lady on one of those stair ride chairs, I freaked out. I was like, no, don't get off of that. It will kill you.
I just left her house at that point. Get out of here, lady.
I never saw my grandmother again.
So, also in 1984, this year was really big. I mean, we left a lot of stuff out. We left out Splash, for God's sake.
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
I mean, honestly, that's a big one because we're talking about how Gremlins and Indy kind of made the PG-13 rating. I mean, Red Dawn is the first PG-13 movie. It's kind of a huge deal. And of course, like you said, Splash. I mean, Daryl Hannah, Tom Hanks, she's a mermaid, he's a dude. It's amazing.
Also, if it
So
hadn't been
good.
for Red Dawn, we would not have had Walter from The Big Lebowski.
It's
Or
true.
LB.
It's
Wow.
true.
It's true.
Yes.